Welcome to the Wellify podcast. My name is Thomas Westenholz and I'm your host. Let me tell you a little bit about my background and why I'm here talking about well-being at work today. So I grew up in Denmark, spent 27 years there, and Denmark has consecutively ranked amongst the highest countries in the Global Happiness Index. They were number second, I think, for the last 3 years. And there's many reasons for why Denmark ranks second, and this culture that I've grown up with, why we have so high level of well-being and happiness. But some key ones are definitely that there's a sense of trust, of social support system and collaboration. And this is what we're going to be looking at today. Part of my background is also that I ran my own company and had more than 50 staff. So I work from the inside and know what it actually means to create a culture of care and what the challenges also are that you might be facing and that I will be facing, which I'll share as well. And lastly, I now also work as a therapist in mental health and well-being, which has given me some new perspectives to add on top of what I already knew and implemented in my own company, of the understanding of human flourishing, the impact of nature, feeling social, movement, and all these different elements, a sense of meaning that we'll be talking about in the podcast going forward and why they're so important. So I want to just start with, why is this even important? Why is it so important to talk about well-being at work? Besides, obviously, the corporation aspect, which is, hey, we don't want staff burning out. We want higher retention. We want more productivity. We obviously don't want as many sick days. So there's all the financial reasons that companies might be having for want to address this. However, I also just want to look at the more humanistic perspective, which is that we spend more time at work than we spend anywhere else. Yeah, we spend more time at work with our colleagues than we spend with our wife, with our partner, with our children, with our friends. And so it becomes quite critical for our overall well-being and life quality that we actually ensure that people are well when they go to work, right? And I often think a lot of workplaces treat humans like they're machines that are operating, that have to meet some end meet some goal, be able to create a certain result, produce a certain skill, which often lead to the sense of burnout, not feeling appreciated, not feeling cared for, the disengagement, the low output, the turnover, and all those issues that, a lot of the HR managers around the country are already dealing with and trying to cope with. So today I really want to talk about a culture of care, which is one of the first key component in changing this overall structure that we live in. And also just want to look at this from a more higher level perspective before we start zooming in a little bit. So start at the macro before we go into the micro level. It's really that as an economy, even as a country, we measure GDP, right? We measure output, financial output. That's the main measurement we use to see if we are successful as a country. It's also the main measurement we use as companies to see if we're successful. This in alone sets us up to create cultures that become very unhealthy for human flourishing. When that's the only measurement, everything else has to be compromised to meet that measurement. When that's what rewards are based on, everything else will be pushed aside and it will push forward a certain kind of person or even change people to make different priorities that are not based on human well-being and that people actually feeling good going to work. So this starts us to a bit of, there's two different aspects I want to talk about in the podcast today that I think has a huge impact on implementing a culture of care. And the reason a culture of care is so important is if people don't feel cared about, they will eventually slowly decrease their mental health. So you will have more sick days. You will also have more disengaged employees. You will have higher lack of retention. More people are going to leave your workplace, and it's going to have a huge financial cost and also human cost. So this is why we should look at creating a culture of care within your company. And there's two key components to doing this that we'll discuss a little bit today. So one part is changing the overall culture where we don't just measure GDP output, but that we actually also measure well-being. Imagine if countries were measuring well-being and took that as a measurement of government success as much as GDP increase. Yeah, then we would see very different policies. We would see very different incentive systems. And that's why the first part you have to change as a company, if you actually want to create a culture of care, is you need to create a new measuring system for success. Yeah, and also a new reward system for success, meaning instead of only measuring increase in financial profits for a company, which is obviously what the shareholders primarily care about, we also need to actually start measuring the well-being of the staff in our companies. And we also need to then start looking at how do we incentivize managers so their reward system, which is what motivate that part of their behavior, is not just focused on increase in profits and efficiencies. It's also that they get rewarded, their bonuses, their salary increase, their performance reviews are also based on the well-being of their staff, of the retention of their staff, on reducing sick days of their staff. And if we started to measure this, we start incentivize different behaviors in our managers that often go lacking when the only thing we measure them on is financial output and efficiencies. So the second part is we need to start looking at the hiring process that we have. So let's start there today, because to create a culture of care, we really need to create different experiences for employees in companies. And let's start creating with what is it we hire for? At the moment, we often hire for expertise, experience in a certain field, technical abilities, financial results. Those are the key components we look for right now in hiring process for a lot of our managers. What if we instead started to looking for EQ, so emotional intelligence, social skills, level of empathy, ability to listen, their sense of warmth and communication ability to feel make other people feel safe, or a sense of curiosity around other people. If we started implementing this in your hiring process, and there's a lot of ways that you can measure things like EQ, emotional intelligence. There's a lot of tests that have now been developed to do that. It's also possible to measure levels of empathy. And again, you could bring them in together and see how they interact, and instead start measuring not just on experience, financial performance, and technical skills, but actually on how they're able to make other people feel that are around them. Because that's a key component. If your managers don't have these skills, you're probably not going to be able to create a culture of care, even if you change incentivize system, even if you change what you measure. The culture is not going to change, because the culture is made up of the people in it. So the first part becomes about hiring people, no longer just on technical abilities, but on actually them being people, especially managers, people who genuinely care, who know how to motivate people, who know how to make people feel safe. If you can do this, you're already onto a winner of a culture of care. Because the little things in the everyday is about coming in. As I said, we spend more than half our life of waking hours at work most of the time, most of us. And that means it's so critical. So why don't we know what's going on in people's private life? Why don't we know what they're looking forward to today? Why don't we know what struggles they bring in? Why don't we know when it's their children's birthdays and what their children know? If we could show these little elements of care, when suddenly it's their child's birthday, bring them a present that that child actually likes, because you've got to know them. You have shown interest and curiosity in them. That start making people feel cared for. And even better, if you actually do care. And if we measured people on emotional intelligence and empathy, we would have managers who genuinely actually care. And that automatically would start making people feel more cared for, more valued, some key indicators of what people actually enjoy coming to work, feel more motivated. And that there's a higher sense of retention. So it really starts with it. And you have to ask yourself, why are we not valuing EQ, emotional intelligence? Why are we not measuring for it in managers? Why are we not looking at the interpersonal skills and their sense of empathy? So as a company, this is what you should start looking at. Changing your hiring process of what managers you bring in. Make sure they have high emotional intelligence, a sense of care, sense of curiosity, are really good at listening and provide support and care, making people feel valued. Are they good at noticing the great things people do, or do they only notice the mistakes people do? Because if you only notice people's mistakes, they're going to feel devalued very quickly and lose motivation. A key component of a good manager is somebody who is able to continuously, even when mistakes are made or targets aren't met, to motivate people by continuously make them feel appreciated, by noticing improvements they're making, not just results, but also effort. So even if a project is late and you as a manager get told off, it's still important that you're able to go to your staff and absorb some of that for them and tell them, hey, we didn't meet the deadline. There are some consequences for that. However, I really value and saw how you did X, Y, and Z and how much effort you put in. Start valuing effort and not just result. It's part of growth mindset theory that I used to develop programs for children in schools here in the UK about. We know that people develop better resilience and also more motivation when we start rewarding and appreciating effort instead of just outcome. So this is a key component. And as I now also work on the side as a couples relationship therapist where I'd worked and have experience, we've really seen that a key component in people coming in distress is that they no longer feel a sense of appreciation. Well, the same happens in work relationships. So this is an important key lesson to actually take with you for this. So let's try and look a little bit at the second element that I was talking about, which is the reward system. Because if you bring a measuring and reward system that only measure efficiencies and financial output, of course, humans, employees are not going to flourish in that system. And over time, they're going to be worn down. They're going to be burned out. They're going to be demotivated. You're going to get poor output from them. You're going to get them putting in the least they have to do. And eventually, you're probably going to leave them and they're going to leave for whoever pays more. They have no incentive to stay with you. You haven't created a culture of care. You haven't created a sense of we are part of something that feels meaningful, a culture where I enjoy coming. If they felt they were coming into friends and family, they would not leave so easily. If they felt appreciated, valued, and a sense of meaning, they would want to stay and put in their very, very best. And this is only looking what you get out of it as a company, but there's also purely, again, the humanistic perspective of, are you only here to make money? Is that the only purpose of life of your company? Or are we also here to try and actually create better lives? It should start with the employees that we hire in our companies. So that brings me to this point of the reward system and measuring system. What we really need to start to do with managers is, instead of just looking at the output they create, whether they meet a certain amount of projects they had to do, make a certain amount of sales, meet certain revenue targets, which is really about the bottom line, the GDP. Again, if we compare it to what is a measurement for a company or the profit margins for a company, then instead, if we suddenly start looking at what is it we're measuring, can we, instead of only measuring targets, profits, growth, and efficiency, can we start measuring team well-being, retention rates, psychological safety, employee satisfaction, burnout reduction, and how connected people feel within their team? If we did this, we could really start then looking at how do we then reward managers based on them meeting those metrics, not just financial metrics, not just, as I said, specific targets of growth or efficiencies, but actually reward them, give them bonuses, give them promotions based on making people feel more connected, more safe, more valued, bigger sense of meaning, more satisfaction in their work. That is when you start seeing a shift, because now you're actually showing them we are not just talking about a nice little poster we put up on our company wall. We are actually incentivizing and rewarding these specific behaviors, these specific matrices that focus on that. And that would start helping changing the culture. So I would really see the two biggest things that a company could do right now is really to start showing in action, my people actually matter. Because it's not enough to have on a nice company poster hanging around the wall, we value our people. It's shown in your hiring process. Are you getting in managers with high level of empathy and emotional intelligence that have that care and curiosity, are able to make people feel safe and comfortable and appreciated? Then you're already on to a winner. And second, are you changing your measuring and reward system to include how safe, how appreciated, how valued, how much meaning your employees find in their work, and how satisfied they are, how connected they feel to their fellow employees? If you did that, you would also start changing the behaviors of those managers in those roles and incentivize them to focus on these interpersonal skills instead of just productivity. So this is really important. So I want to just talk a little bit about this, getting to know your employees as human beings, because often cultures have completely lost this sense of human connection. In the sense and pursuit of optimizing productivity, which is what most companies are focused on, reducing costs, increasing profit margins, and just get as much efficiency as possible. But to what purpose? For what? Yeah, if we cannot help our employees feel safe and good and nurtured and valued, your company is going to get lower margins long term. So that's a financial loss. You're going to have huge recruitment costs. They cost enormous amount of money to recruit people, to retrain them, to lose expertise because people are demotivated. It costs an enormous amount of money for companies to have people off sick with mental health problems. So there's a huge financial loss long term in not caring about people. And there's a huge humanistic loss in the human cost of people going to work and spending most of their life in an environment that feels rubbish. And we know from research in the UK that the majority of people going to work do not like their job. They don't want to go to work. They don't like it. That should tells you something really important, that most companies are not getting this right. Yeah, they're really created cultures where people don't feel valued, don't feel cared for. So how do we start showing the sense of care? I mentioned some of them before. Actually have a genuine curiosity and care for your staff. Know and ask them about their children. How are your children? Know how old they are. Know their birthdays. Know what they like and appreciate. So you can show these little moments of care. Maybe get their child a little present that you know they would like based on this information. That's how we show care in action. If you know things about their life and that one of your staff is going through a divorce, make sure and figure out what support they need. Get everybody to chip in a bit. That will make them feel part of a family culture and feel cared for. It's showing that I know you, I know your life, I know what's going on inside you, your stresses, your worries, what you enjoy, and I take action to help support your joy and nurturement and to try and reduce your amount of stress in your life. That's what care is, to be able to show that consistently. And to do that, you have to actually be curious about people's lives, your employees' lives. Otherwise, it won't land as a sense of care because you're not able to take precise, specific action that is supportive for their stress or help support things that they value, right? So this is really important, and it's individual. Each employee will have different histories, enjoy different things, be stressed about different things. Yeah. And if you know this, you can show care. If you know one of your staff is really, really stressed coming in early in the morning because they have kids, tell them, hey, come half an hour later, and you can just work half an hour later if that's what you need. Or we can find a different structure that works for you. That shows a sense of care. It shows that you know something about them and is acting in their best interest. Yeah, this is a really key component. Another part that is important is you could do little check-ins. You know, what we often say to couples is, if you lose touch with each other's world for too long, you start drifting apart, feeling disconnected. Well, the same will happen with co-workers. So this is where having little check-ins in the morning, you could get your team together, sit around in a little circle and just get people to share one thing they're looking forward to today. And that will also tell you early warning signs if somebody's getting depressed, because they're probably not looking forward to anything on a repeated basis. Yeah, so it can tell you early warning signs when people are in distress, so you can intervene and show support before it's too late and they go off and have to be sick and get really depressed. Yeah, so it's not only for early intervention, but also it could be, what is it that you're looking forward to today, and what is something that's stressing you? That allows you to come in and be a support system, and then look at, as a team together, how can we support this person? Yeah. And that means suddenly people start feeling they're part of a community, which is a key part of human well-being, of feeling part of a community, a social structure, a social support system. Probably, I would say, the number one most important factor for human well-being, and probably one of the key things that are missing in most workplaces. Hence why people often feel alone, get anxiety, get depression, and struggle to have a sense of meaning and purpose and enjoyment in going to work. Yeah, so you can do that with something that simple. It's not the only thing, there's lots of things, but that's one example of something you can actually start doing. So really start the day with human connection. Make it a priority instead of, again, a beautiful poster. And this also helps encourage a sense of vulnerability. It builds trust within the team. It creates emotional safety. It helps team members feel supported by each other. And it prevents that silent suffering that often leads to disengagement and mental health issues. So instead of this philosophy of individualism that we have cultivated for too long, is everybody handle their own problem, start creating a culture. Your problem is our problem. And I tell you, your culture, your staff motivation, will change significantly. Your retention rate will improve significantly. The output from those employees will improve significantly. And most of all, you'll actually have created an environment that create happy, nurturing, supported people that want to come to work and are not doing it purely for external motivation in the financial sense of what you pay them. If that's all you have to offer, they're going to jump ship the second somebody offer them the same job for more money. Yeah, if you create a culture of real care and nurturement and safety and support that I talked about today, then they won't just jump ship because somebody offered them a little bit more money. They will certainly come to you, talk to you about it, see what they can do to stay, and they will have a sense of loyalty as well. Because loyalty is a sense of mutual care, whether it's a romantic relationship, a work relationship. Mutual reciprocal care is what creates a sense of attachment, of care, of alignment, of commitment to someone or something. So that's really where you should start. We're obviously going to look in future podcasts about a lot of other things that you could do to both improve your company culture, but also improve well-being at work. But this is a good starting point. So have a think, have a discussion with your managers about this, and see how they respond. And again, if you need more help, support, then just get in touch on the wellify.uk website. There'll be a link below here, and book a free consultation, and I'll happy to have a chat with you about what you can do to improve your company culture and improve the well-being of your staff. Life is too short. Let's make sure that people actually enjoy going to work. I'll see you on the next episode.